I never believed things like this could happen to me. The kind of stories people share on talk shows, in memoirs, or even as whispers among friends about how one decision changes everything. That wasn't me. I was the girl who played it safe, who lived within the lines. My name is Emily Carter, and until last year, my life was an endless routine. At 32, I worked as a middle school English teacher in a small town in Ohio. I lived alone in a two-bedroom apartment above a used bookstore, with shelves that creaked under the weight of old novels and the comforting smell of paper and dust. My days revolved around lesson plans, grading, and the occasional dinner with my best friend, Sarah. My parents lived 2 hours away, and though I loved them, we only spoke once a week, usually on Sunday evenings. I had convinced myself that this was enough. That stability was the same thing as happiness. That staying within the walls I'd built was safer than risking disappointment. And then, in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, my walls cracked. It had been raining all day. Students were restless, teachers exhausted, and the sound of rain hitting the windows was a constant reminder of how dreary everything felt. I was stacking essays on my desk, preparing to leave, when the principal, Mr. Daniels, stepped into my classroom. He was in his late 50s, with a calm but serious face that never seemed to smile unless he absolutely had to. "Emily, do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course," I said, pushing the stack of papers aside. He closed the door and sat down across from me, his hands clasped together, and there was an unusual nervousness in his tone. "We've been contacted by an exchange program. They've run into a problem. A student who just arrived from Spain doesn't have a host family. Something fell through last minute. They need someone immediately." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're telling me this because you live alone, you're responsible," and he paused, searching for the right words. "And I think you'd be perfect for it." I laughed, almost choking on the absurdity. "Me? Host a teenager? I can barely keep plants alive." He smiled faintly. "I know it's last minute, but this student, Elena, she's bright, hardworking, and she needs a place to stay. Just for the semester. Think about it, Emily. Sometimes opportunities come when we least expect them." I wanted to say no. I wanted to insist that my life was too small, too ordinary, too unequipped for such a responsibility. But something in the way he said her name, Elena, made me pause. He slid a folder across my desk, and inside was a photograph of a girl with long dark hair, a gentle smile, and eyes that seemed to hold a mixture of excitement and fear. Beneath her picture was a short bio. 16 years old, from Madrid, passionate about literature and music, dreams of becoming a writer. A strange pull gripped me. Literature. That was my world too. For reasons I couldn't explain, I heard myself saying, "Okay, I'll do it." And that was the moment everything began to change. The first night Elena arrived, I realized how unprepared I truly was. She stood in my doorway with a single suitcase, her eyes wide as she took in the apartment. "It's cozy," she said softly, her accent delicate but clear. "Cozy is a nice way of saying small." I joked and she smiled. We fumbled through the first week like strangers forced to dance together without knowing the steps. She was polite, always saying thank you, but there was a distance between us. She spent most of her time in her room or with her phone, while I hovered awkwardly, unsure how much to interfere. Dinner was the worst. I was used to eating alone, usually something quick like cereal or takeout. Now I found myself Googling easy recipes and nearly setting off the smoke alarm twice. But then one evening, I walked into the living room and found her curled up on the couch with a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Her brows were furrowed, and she was scribbling notes in the margins. "You've read that one before?" I asked, surprised. She looked up, eyes lighting up for the first time. "Yes, twice. But I always find something new. Why does Atticus Finch choose to defend Tom Robinson, even when he knows he will lose?" The question opened a door. What began as a simple conversation stretched into hours. We talked about courage, justice, and the power of words. For the first time, the silence between us dissolved, replaced with laughter and shared curiosity. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone in the quiet apartment and realized something startling. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lonely. Days turned into weeks and our bond deepened. She taught me how to make churros, laughing at my clumsy attempts. I showed her the small joys of American diners, where she marveled at the endless refills of coffee and the stacks of pancakes bigger than her face. On Sundays, we started baking together. Sometimes cakes, sometimes bread. The kitchen became messy, covered in flour and sugar, but it felt alive. Elena had a way of noticing things I'd ignored. One night, she asked me, "Why don't you travel?" I blinked. "Travel? Yes. You're a teacher. You love stories. Don't you want to see the world?" Her words struck a nerve. I had dreamed of traveling when I was younger, but life had gotten in the way. Fear disguised itself as responsibility. I had convinced myself it wasn't for me. Hearing the question from her lips made the excuse sound hollow. Over the months, she didn't just bring joy into my home, she challenged me. She forced me to see how small I had allowed my life to become. And slowly, a daring thought began to take shape. Maybe I could change too. By spring, that thought became action. I applied for a teacher exchange program, something I never would have considered before. When I received the acceptance email, my heart raced. I was going to Spain. When Elena returned home for the summer, I followed. She and her family welcomed me with open arms, and I found myself walking the streets of Madrid, tasting foods I couldn't pronounce, listening to music that made me want to dance even though I had two left feet. I felt alive in ways I hadn't in years. The ordinary, cautious Emily Carter was gone. In her place was someone braver, someone willing to say yes to the unknown. I never believed it could happen to me, but it did, and it changed everything.